Hey friends, on the way to work this morning, I was listening to a song, and it's called "Blown Away" by Hillsong United. And personally, I think it's one of the more powerful songs they've ever written. You may disagree with Hillsong's theology, but this song is not addressing any of their theology for their church. It's really it's a song about Jesus and his death. And so it really got me thinking, like it really struck a chord with me this morning, because we're getting prepared for Passover, and we're getting prepared for Resurrection Sunday, Passion Week, and all the I mean, that's why it's called Passion Week, is because it was a very highly emotional time in the life of Christ, where he as Luke says, he sweat. He was there was so much like burden in his heart that he actually sweat drops of blood, which is means you're very distressed in order to do that. And it actually reminded me of what I think are some of the saddest verses in the Bible. And I don't know if you've ever sat around and thought, hey, what's the saddest verse in the Bible? Like, most people don't. They may not think about it, but for me, there's two passages that really are the saddest to me in the Bible, and the first one is in John chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. It says, John is writing about Jesus, and he says, "This was the true light that coming into the world enlightens every person." And Jesus called himself the light of the world, but this is where it takes a turn. He says in verse 10, "He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, and yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not accept him." I mean, really pondering that for a second, like imagining his hands created the world. His hands actually formed Adam. And as he's forming Adam with his hands, I wonder if Jesus is thinking about what Adam's going to do in a short amount of time that's going to result in the death of Jesus thousands of years later. But he created the world, and he came into the world as the Messiah, and all the prophecies were talking about this Messiah who was coming, and Jesus fulfilled these prophecies. And the world didn't know him. And then he came to his own people. He came to Israel, and he came to the people who had been given the Torah. Like God had literally given his own instruction to this people, and the prophecies about what the Messiah would look like when he came, where he'd be born, like all sorts of details about the life of the Messiah, so that they would recognize him when he came. And he came to his own, in verse 11, and his own people didn't accept him. And you see later on in Jesus' ministry, it's in Matthew 23, where he is coming to Jerusalem, and it's the end of his ministry, and he's about to be crucified, and he knows what awaits him. And he looks over the city and he weeps over it. The city of Jerusalem, the place that bore the temple. God said that I'm going to put my temple, and that's where my name is going to be. And if you pray towards the temple, I'll hear you. The temple that was conducting the sacrifices for sins to be forgiven. The temple that was like the center of worship for the Jewish people and the Jewish religion. And Jesus comes into the city knowing what is awaiting him in a very short amount of time. And he says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who have been sent to her. How often I have wanted to gather your children together, the way a hen gathers its chicks and hides those chicks under its wings. And you were unwilling. You didn't want it. You didn't want me to do that for you. You didn't want me to gather your children. You didn't want me to protect you." And he says at verse 38, Matthew 23:38, "Behold, your house is being left to you desolate." And so what we find out, obviously, later on in history is that the Jerusalem is sacked, the temple is destroyed, lays in ruins, never to be rebuilt. And so, well, never to be rebuilt yet, all right? And it grieves my heart, because Jesus is longing to gather people. He's He comes to his own, and his own reject him. And it reminded me of that was prophesied, right? Just, I mean, lest we think that that wasn't already the plan, or that wasn't already known by God. Isaiah 53:3 tells us he was despised and abandoned by men, a man of great pain and familiar with sickness. And like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we had no regard for him. So this is a messianic prophecy referring to the Messiah who was going to come, and he was going to be despised and rejected, abandoned by men, abandoned by his own disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane. So as we prepare our hearts for Passover, as we prepare our hearts for Palm Sunday and the Passion Week and Resurrection Sunday, I just encourage you to don't let yourself abandon him. Don't let yourself reject him. He was a man acquainted with sorrows and griefs. He's a man that can understand the pain, the difficulty that we go through. When he comes to you, don't abandon him. Like, don't turn away from him. Don't reject him. And so I just wanted to share that with you. This is this is Holy Week, right? This is getting close to the ultimate moment in Christian history, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so I encourage you just to take some time. One of the things that I do every year is I watch movies and television shows that depict the life of Christ, and certainly, almost every year I watch The Passion of the Christ, and it helps put me back in the frame of mind of what Jesus suffered for me. So I pray that it's an encouragement to you. It might kind of discourage you a little bit, but I pray that it's encouragement to you, because you need to understand what he suffered for you, what he suffered for me. And hopefully that leads us to appreciate the sacrifice and to honor that sacrifice by the way we live our lives. God bless, and I pray that you have a great week.